Hey everyone! Today we're going to pull back the curtain on a piece of technology you use every single day, probably without even thinking about it. We're talking about Amazon Web Services, or AWS. It is the invisible engine that powers, well, a massive chunk of your digital life.
I mean, seriously, have you ever stopped to wonder, when you're streaming a movie, ordering a car, or just scrolling through your feed, what is making all of that happen in a split second? It's not magic, I promise. A huge part of the answer is the cloud, and AWS is, without a doubt, the biggest player in that whole game.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to look at what things were like before the cloud existed. Then we'll dive into this really cool idea of computing like electricity. We'll break down how it all actually works, see how it's running your digital world, and then of course we've got to ask, what's the catch? And we'll wrap it all up with the cloud's big question.
Okay, first up, the world before cloud. You see, to really get why AWS is such a massive deal, we have to travel back in time a bit and look at how things used to be done. Let's call it the old, slow, and very expensive way.
The difference here is just, it's night and day. Imagine you're a startup back in the early 2000s with a brilliant idea. First, you'd have to go out and spend a fortune on these huge physical servers. Then you'd have to find a data center to house them, worry about power and cooling, and constantly be thinking about expensive upgrades. It was a massive headache. The cloud just completely flips that script. Now you just rent what you need over the internet and can grow or shrink instantly.
And that leads us to the absolute light bulb moment behind AWS, this revolutionary idea of treating computing power just like a utility. So what is AWS officially? Well, it's a cloud computing platform from Amazon that gives anyone on-demand access to all the techie resources you could want. Servers, storage, databases, you name it, all delivered right over the internet. The most important part? No hardware to buy. Ever.
This analogy is just perfect. Think about it. You don't build your own power plants in the backyard just to turn on a lamp, right? No. You just plug into the grid and pay your electric bill. AWS applied that exact same thinking to computing power, and it completely changed the tech world forever.
All right, so we get the what and the why. Now let's dig into the how. How does this whole thing actually work under the hood? Let's break down the features that make it so incredibly powerful.
This concept, called elasticity, is pure genius. So imagine an online store on a normal day just humming along on a couple of servers. But then, bam, it's Black Friday. Traffic just explodes. In the old days, the website would have just crashed and burned. But with AWS, it automatically senses the spike and adds more servers instantly. And here's the magic trick. As soon as the sale is over and traffic dies down, AWS gets rid of those extra servers, so you stop paying for them. You only paid for that peak power for the few hours you actually needed it.
Now, beyond that incredible ability to scale, there are a few other huge reasons AWS is such a giant. The pay-as-you-go model means you don't need a huge pile of cash to get started. It has a massive global network of data centers, which means services are fast for everyone everywhere. It's built to be highly available, which is just a fancy way of saying it's designed to never ever stop running. And it is incredibly secure, so secure that banks and governments trust it with their most critical data.
Okay, look, AWS has over 200 different services, and it can be totally overwhelming, but you can really boil it down to a few key buckets. You've got compute, and the main service there is EC2. Think of it as renting a virtual server in the cloud. Then there's storage with S3, which is like having an infinite hard drive on the internet. For databases, a service like RDS takes care of all the messy database management for you. And finally, delivery, with things like CloudFront, which is how companies like Netflix get movies to your screen super fast.
Okay, let's bring all this tech talk back down to earth. Let's look at how AWS is powering your world every single day in ways you probably never even noticed.
So next time you're binge watching your favorite show on Netflix, you're using AWS. The entire platform runs on it. It allows Netflix to handle those massive, unpredictable traffic spikes. You know, like when a new season of a hit show drops and literally millions of people press play at the same time. AWS is what keeps it all from crashing.
Or how about when you call in Uber? The second you tap that button, AWS is working like crazy in the background, matching you with a driver, calculating the price, and mapping the fastest route, all in a fraction of a second. That kind of instant global number crunching is exactly what the cloud was made for.
And it's not just for convenience. Big financial players like Capital One run their core banking applications on AWS. We're talking about protecting your money and your most sensitive data. That is a huge vote of confidence in the platform's security.
And of course, the apps that live on your phone.
Social media giants like Instagram and parts of TikTok depend on AWS to host the billions, literally billions of photos and videos that we all upload and scroll through every day. The scale is just mind-boggling.
So at this point, it all sounds pretty perfect, right? A seamless, all-powerful foundation for the internet. Well, not quite. So let's talk about it. What's the catch?
Well, there are a few big ones. First, the pricing can get super complex. It's not always easy to predict what your bill will be. Second, it's not for beginners. You really need some serious technical skills to manage it properly. Then there's something called vendor lock-in, which basically means once you build your entire company on AWS, it becomes incredibly difficult and expensive to ever leave. And finally, if you need really good customer support, yeah, that's going to cost you extra.
And this right here is the big, blinking warning sign. That pay-as-you-go model is fantastic, but it's a double-edged sword. If you're not constantly watching your usage, your costs can spiral out of control before you even know what's happening.
And all of this brings us to our final takeaway, and what I like to call the cloud's big question. So if you're going to walk away with just one thought, let it be this: AWS lets anyone, from a single person with an idea to a massive global company, rent world-class supercomputing power. It's the scalable, secure, and affordable foundation that a huge chunk of our modern internet is built on.
And that leads us with one final, pretty big thought to chew on. The cloud, led by AWS, makes our digital lives possible. But what does it mean for the future of the internet when one single company provides so much of its fundamental infrastructure? That's definitely something to think about. Thanks for watching.